Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Child Care Bridge Podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your child care center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Child Care Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hello and welcome to episode 009 of the Child Care Bridge. Today's topic is the third of 4-part series and what you can do to get yourself in an amazing position for the upcoming year. So a lot of us go into kind of holiday mode. My thought process for you is to start your year on fire. Start your year ahead of the curve, ahead of all your competitors so that you hit the ground running and you're not trying to play catch up for the entire rest of the year. So in the first episode of this 4-part series, we talked about one of the 4 M's, marketing, all the different things that you can do to get your marketing better positioned for the rest of this year and walking into next year. The second M that we talked about was money. What are the things you can do to legally minimize your taxes? How can you drive some more revenue? And more importantly, how can you really get in sync, in tune, in alignment with all of your numbers? Today's episode is going to be focused on the third M, which is manpower. So all things staffing, hiring, culture, people, everything kind of falls under that manpower bucket. Now, I know it's been a really sore subject. It's been one of those tough ones for the last year plus of hiring and people, and there's a lot of misconceptions, in my opinion, from everything that I've seen. Now, you can sit and you can complain and say, nobody wants to work, everybody wants all this money, nobody cares about my center anymore or making an impact, or you can do the opposite and look at how you can position your center to be a great place to work. How can you position your center to have kind of a road that people can kind of climb and start to see their careers advance and to give them a fulfilling environment? 2 completely opposite sides of the spectrum. And I definitely have been on the first side many times of, oh, geez, this person quit and they're ungrateful and this person's asking for more money and this is ridiculous. And then I've stopped myself and said, okay, great. What can I do to really make an impact in their lives? What do they really want? What do they really care about? So if I look at how you can get a jump on next year, this is largely going to be doing some cleanup, but even more importantly, lasering in on a couple of areas that you may not have feedback on. So the first activity that I want you to execute is to do an employee survey. And a few things need to happen for this to give you the feedback that you're going to need to then make some strategic decisions. The first thing is it has to be completely anonymous. Don't do the little trickery where you send it through something like SurveyMonkey and you import their emails and it actually can track what email address is associated with what survey. Don't send a Google form that they have to log in with their company email. It needs to be 100% anonymous because when one person finds out that it's not, all of your feedback is going to be tainted. People are not going to give you honest, open, candid feedback. They're going to filter. They're going to be worried that the fear of repercussion. Well, if I say what I really feel, then I'm probably going to get terminated. So you have to make sure that it's 100% anonymous and that you convey that when this gets sent out and you show them how this is how it's anonymous, there's no tracking, etc. Everyone gets the same link. The links aren't dynamic, etc. On this survey, I'm looking for you to ask a couple of questions. And these are, I would say they're in no particular order, but I want you can rearrange things as you see fit, and you can add a question or two, but there's a couple of base questions that I need you to get feedback on. The first one, and my favorite question, is on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with your work? How happy are you at work? Scale 1 to 10. Second question, just allows them to give feedback. What made you that particular number? Give me some feedback. If you're a 10, why are you a 10? If you're a 1, why are you a 1? If you're a 5, why are you a 5? You want that benchmark, that number across the company, but I also need you to have some feedback, because the whole point of doing this is for you to have some actionable feedback, actionable things that you can take into the rest of the year and into next year. Next question, what do you like most about your position? Next question, what do you like least about your position? And now from here, so those 3 questions are the 3 for me that I want to make sure that you have on the survey. From there, you can ask a couple other questions. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, how appreciated do you feel? On a scale of 1 to 10, how well compensated do you feel you are? You can ask questions about the culture. Tell us what the culture is like to you at our center. And I usually like to end with a question around overall improvement of the business, of the center, of profitability. So, like, if you were in my shoes, what are 3 things you would change? Or what are 3 things you would do to help grow our business? Not necessarily just what are 3 things you want to change, because they could be, or 3 things you want. Like, you could get some kind of crazy answers. I'm looking for more feedback around what are 3 things that you would do to grow the business, because those are going to give you some other ideas that you may not have thought about. Well, we should look at X. Or maybe you say, what is the single most important thing we need to do? So there's a lot of different ways you can word the questions, but I'm looking for you to get a benchmark score of employee happiness. And then you're going to ask that question. If I had my way, you're going to send out a survey once a month with that one question only, and then you're going to gauge it. Worst case scenario, you're going to send it out once a quarter. But that's going to give you a baseline of your happiness. What do you like most? What do you like least? And then again, from there, you can play with the different questions around what would you do to improve the business? What's the most important thing? If you want to get a flavor on your culture, you could ask a couple of questions regarding culture. It varies based on the center. But for me, that big one is really, I want you to have that gauge of employee happiness. If you have anything that's less than an 8, I want to make sure that this becomes your number 1 objective for the remainder of the year and into early next year. Because what you're going to find is that if you have that revolving door, it's only going to continue to get worse. So when you get the feedback of, let's say that you have a 7.2 as an overall score, not terrible, but it's not where I would be comfortable for you to be sitting, essentially. I want to see what the feedback is. Right now, the number 1 feedback is going to be pay, which we're going to talk about in just a second. Appreciation, long hours. But look at what that feedback is, and look at what are 1 thing or 2 things, what are a couple things that you can start to put into practice. Because the whole point of this survey is for you to try and make any kind of quick hit wins that you can. The last thing that you want to do is send out the survey, get feedback, and do nothing. Because I promise you, if you do this survey again early next year, a couple months later, and you didn't make any changes based on the feedback, then happiness scores are going to go down and you're going to get more feedback. What do you like least about being here? Well, the owner doesn't seem to care what people say. Like, you're going to start to see that rear its ugly head. So as you get that feedback, I want you to then make a list of, is there 1 thing that you can do? Could be as simple as people say they don't feel appreciated. Great. What are 5 things you can do in the remainder of the year to make your team feel appreciated? Now, even if that appreciation does not come up on your survey, I want you to look at, for the remainder of this year and then into next year and beyond, what are some quick ways that you can have your team feel more appreciated? Now, rapid fire a couple things to you. You don't have to do all of them. I'm going to give you ideas that I've executed and other centers that we've worked with have executed with good success. First one, employee of the month. when whoever is employee of the month, they get XYZ, maybe a gift card to a spa or a restaurant. They get a parking space up front, for example. They get a nice picture and then maybe an extra day off. Once a month, luncheon for the team. Order something in. One person maybe the employee of the month gets to pick what that food is for the month, and you have a nice catered lunch once a month. It doesn't have to be extremely expensive. It can be something like Chipotle or Panera or Moe's or some local restaurants to you. It doesn't have to cost you thousands of dollars. But once a month, I want there to be kind of that bonding experience, that lunch. Could be a breakfast, for example. Maybe you're bringing in breakfast pizza and some fresh coffee. I want you to look at where the employee break room area is, and are there a couple of things that you can add to the break room to make it a little bit more welcoming? Maybe it's buying an espresso machine, for example. Maybe it's having free soft drinks, or free snacks. What are some of those little things that you can do? You can look at an app called Tiny Pulse, which allows people to send kind of virtual cheers for peers. So, hey, thank you to XYZ person for helping go above and beyond. You can have a board that people print or pin up little note cards that say, hey, I'm so thankful that this person was living out this core value, or this person did XYZ, just so that stuff is front and center. I would encourage you to buy some greeting cards, and once a week to send a very nice handwritten message and greeting card. Doesn't have to include a gift certificate, but that helps. Could be, again, small. We're talking $10, $20. Doesn't have to be a $100 gift card. And just a handwritten thank you message to someone on your team. So your first objective is to deploy this survey, get a benchmark as to where your employee happiness is, and look at, in addition to some acts of appreciation to your team, what else kind of reared its head on that survey that you can tie up in a bow this year, so that you're cleaning that up. Because what you don't want to do, and I'll put yourself in your team's shoes, the holiday time and the new year is a time of reflection. It is the number one time when people make decisions around where they want to work. If they're feeling underappreciated, if they're feeling that you're not listening to them, if they're unhappy, what you don't want to do is walk into the new year and have 3, 4, 5 resignations. You don't want to have people quitting, giving their 2 weeks notice. You want to get ahead of any of that, save some of those employees, if not all of them, and improve your culture and your overall atmosphere for your team. When everyone else then is back into that struggling mode from a hiring standpoint, and oh my gosh, the sky is falling again, you are already ahead of the curve. That's the first thing I want you to do. And I know that one has, step 2 and step 3 and B and C and all that kind of, so there's obviously multiple steps, and that's going to vary. But the base step is to deploy a survey that's anonymous, gather feedback, take some of the feedback, execute it, and then also execute some random appreciation and some quick wins to show the team that you really care. You definitely, if you don't have a holiday party planned for the team, small holiday bonuses for Thanksgiving, for example, or gift cards, you want to make sure that you're doing all of that fun stuff as well, if you're not, in addition to all the other things that we just talked about. The second thing that I want you to do is to really take stock of your team. This normally is done with a leadership team. So if you've got one location, let's say you've got, 15 team members and maybe 3 people that are on your leadership team, for example, might be a lead teacher, yourself, and a director. If you've got an office manager, it varies. The management team and or leadership team varies based on the type of center you have, how many locations, etc. But what I'm looking for you to do is I want you to size up your staff, and I want you to rate them, but I want you to rate them in 2 kind of completely different areas. The first one is, I hope that you have core values. If not, it's going to be tough to rate them in the first area, but I'm looking for you to rate them. Are they living out the core value of X? One of my core values is being a futurist. So you're constantly on that leading edge of what's next. So if you list out your core values and then you list out your team, you want to go through and see who's actually living out your core values. The second piece, and this could be done on an Excel document, for example. If you want to do it on paper, you can definitely do that on paper also, just to make sure that it stays confidential so the whole company doesn't end up seeing it. But you're going to deploy a few additional ratings for each of your team members. So you're going to rate each person. Do they get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? So get it. That means, do they understand their job? Do they have a knack for what they're supposed to be doing? Wants it shows you that they have this drive for kind of continued education. Like you can feel their energy. Like you can feel somebody that's kind of just there, and you can feel the teacher or the director or the team member that like they show up every day ready to go. They have great energy. They're going above and beyond. Like you can see the difference between an average performer and what I would deem an A player. The final one is capacity. And that's an interesting one because do they have the capacity to continue to grow and thrive? Like you might say, my director, that they don't have the capacity. Like I've got them half the week they're having to fill in as a teacher. The other half the week they're filling in for the chef, for example. So they have no capacity to end up filling that particular role to the level that I need. And what I'm looking for after you add the core values, are they living out your core values? And then do they have the capacity to do their job? Do they want it? Do they get it? You're going to start to see some trends start to boil up. And what I'm looking for you here, and I know this can be painful, but are there any people that are on your team that you need to replace? Are there any people that you're like, this person has been a drain on the culture, they hate it, they complain all the time, they're draining the staff, and the reason that you haven't replaced them is because you feel like it's going to be terrible to start hiring again. You know that it's not easy, and you're so, I'll keep that person. The downside to keeping people like that is that it's only going to hurt everything else that you have going on. It's only going to keep hurting the business, the culture. It's going to hurt you mentally. So after you go through this exercise, you're either going to find that everyone is performing average. Some people are performing really well versus average, but the chances are pretty high you're going to have one or two people that they don't get it, they don't want it, they don't have the capacity, they're not living out your core values, that you really need to make those hard decisions now. It's not fair for you to just keep stringing them along, but it's also not fair for them to do that to you. If they really don't want to be there, they're just there for the paycheck, they probably are also actively looking for something else. It's only then going to make your year more challenging or the start of your next year because they're going to end up quitting most likely at some point anyways. So I need you to make those tough decisions. Hopefully it's not more than a person or two, but I'm going to challenge you to make those decisions now versus waiting. The last thing that I want you to do to get a jump for next year is to go back on a hiring spree, at the very least, a recruiting spree. So I should have said recruiting spree versus hiring spree. I want you to have lots of resumes coming in. I want you to look at your job ad to really size up. Is it a great job ad? Would you apply to work there? Are your benefits, is your compensation package accurate? Is it going to compel people to come to your center versus a different center? And then not even just comparing center to center, but are you going to grab them versus Starbucks, candidly? If Starbucks is paying $18 an hour plus stock options plus education credits, and you're paying $13 an hour without any of the other things, and you might be going after the same kind of talent, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge or a little bit of an uphill battle. So really look at all of that. Is it adequate to attract the people that you need? And what I'm looking for you to do this year is to clean all that stuff up, but also to get some more job ads going. Start to get some more resumes. Start to be more actively recruiting, because I want you to build a bench. Very, very few centers, if any, ever have a bench of people that they can then try and go after and potentially poach. And what you want to do is build up this bench so that if a position opens up, whether you're looking at potentially having a new center next year, you know you're going to need another director or you're going to need another layer of management. Start building your bench of potential directors. You might say, well, Michael, they all have jobs. Those are the people I want you to build a bench. Why would you want to do that? A players rarely are sitting on the sidelines out of work. A players need to be poached. A players need to be in a toxic environment and to come into your environment that is non-toxic. They're not typically sitting around on the sidelines collecting unemployment. No offense to anyone that's collecting unemployment. People that have valid reasons. But A players are typically working. They're go-getters. Those are the people, again, that they want it. They want to do a great job. And if you build up that bench, you might have 8 different potential people, and you need to then nurture those relationships. That could be having a coffee meeting once a month or every other month. That could be sending an email, a handwritten letter. But you have that bench built up so that when the time comes, hey, I have an opening. Would you be open to considering it? It's going to be a lot easier for you to get that foot in the door and try and convince them to come to your center because you've been building that relationship. They're not just seeing a job ad, for example, in job shopping, but rather you're kind of pushing them along because you've been building and nurturing that relationship. If you clean up and have all of your hiring stuff, all this manpower related stuff. So if you look at it, you did an employee survey and you were able to get some great feedback. You started appreciating your team a little bit more by deploying a few of the suggestions. You get that moving in the right direction. You go through and you audit your team to see who's an A player, who's an F player, and you make the decision, that hard decision, that you may have to let a person or two go. And then finally, you start to build your bench by actively recruiting and getting the word out there again and making sure that you actually have resumes before you need them. I promise you that you're walking into the next year on fire. You're also ending your year on fire. Hope you'd enjoyed today's episode. Again, this is the 3 of 4-part series of what you need to do to really get a jump start on the next year and end your year strong. Thank you as always for listening. Tune in to the next week's episode. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.